In 2014, a fragment of stained Victorian cloth was said to hold the DNA that could finally unmask Jack the Ripper. The claim sparked a media frenzy and fear so profound that experts demanded a reanalysis. Now, in 2025, new forensic breakthroughs have reignited debate about what that evidence truly proves. Could disturbing results from both centuries force us to question everything we thought we knew? Whitechapel in 1888 was a place of shadows and uncertainty. Narrow streets twisted through rows of crumbling brick, crowded with families and strangers who barely scraped by. The lodging houses overflowed, offering a bed for a night to anyone with a few pennies. For many women, survival meant navigating a world that left little room for dignity or safety. Marianne Nichols, the first to die, moved from workhouse to workhouse, her dreams worn thin by hardship and alcohol. Annie Chapman, once married and hopeful, clung to the idea of reuniting with her children, even as she struggled to find shelter each night. Elizabeth Stride, who spoke of her Swedish roots and plans to open a cafe, found herself instead on the margins, her ambitions lost to circumstance. Catherine Eddowes, known for her wit and resilience, slipped through the city's support networks, always searching for the next meal or a place to rest. Mary Jane Kelly, the youngest, rented a small room and spoke of returning to Wales, hoping for a fresh start that never came. Between August and November, these 5 women were murdered in ways that shocked even a city hardened by poverty and violence. The brutality of the killings, each more savage than the last, sent waves of fear through Whitechapel. Neighbours whispered about a killer who struck without warning, choosing victims who seemed invisible to those in power, but whose loss was deeply felt in the community. The press latched onto the story, filling their pages with lurid headlines and blood-red illustrations. Newspapers like The Star and the Illustrated Police News turned the murders into a spectacle, fueling panic and suspicion. Circulation soared as every new detail, real or imagined, was devoured by a public desperate for answers. The frenzy pushed the police to expand their patrols and inspired citizen watch groups, but it also deepened the sense of helplessness among the poor. In the chaos, the lives of the murdered women were often reduced to caricature, their humanity lost beneath sensational stories and rumors. Yet the records, workhouse logs, coroner's notes, census lists show women who fought for survival, who had families, hopes, and histories. In a city gripped by fear, their stories remind us that the true cost of the Ripper's crimes was measured not just in headlines, but in the lives and dreams cut short. Any object tied to these murders, real or imagined, would carry a weight far beyond its physical presence, shaping the myths and memories that followed for generations. In September 2014, headlines across the UK and beyond erupted with news that the Jack the Ripper mystery might finally be solved. The catalyst was a long blood-stained shawl, purportedly found beside Catherine Eddowes' body in Mitre Square, now thrust into the spotlight after more than a century in private hands. Russell Edwards, a businessman and self-described Ripper enthusiast, had purchased the shawl at auction in 2007. He believed it held secrets that could settle the world's most infamous unsolved case. To test this, Edwards enlisted Dr. Jari Louhelainen, a senior lecturer in molecular biology with experience in ancient DNA analysis. Louhelainen began work in 2011, extracting samples from the shawl's blood and semen stains. The process relied on mitochondrial DNA, a genetic marker passed down the maternal line and often used in cases where only degraded historic samples are available. After 3 years of testing, Louhelainen announced 2 critical findings. The bloodstains matched the mitochondrial DNA profile of a living descendant of Catherine Eddowes, while the semen stains matched a living maternal relative of Aaron Kosminski, one of the original police suspects from 1888. These findings, though based on mitochondrial DNA rather than uniquely identifying nuclear DNA, were presented as the first direct genetic link between victim and suspect. The story broke with explosive speed. Within 72 hours, major newspapers like the Mail on Sunday ran front-page stories, and television segments dissected every detail. Edwards published a book, and interviews with both the scientist and the collector dominated the news cycle. For a brief moment, it seemed the Ripper's identity had been unmasked. The media framed the discovery as a breakthrough, with headlines promising closure for a mystery that had haunted London for generations. Yet beneath the surface, the announcement raised as many questions as it answered. The chain of custody for the shawl, the reliability of mitochondrial DNA to single out one individual, and the lack of peer-reviewed publication all lingered in the background. But none of that slowed the initial rush. Forensic science, historical intrigue, and the myth of Jack the Ripper collided in a media frenzy, reigniting public obsession and drawing new scrutiny to the evidence that claimed to bring closure. Forensic scientists quickly raised alarms about the 2014 DNA study, zeroing in on the technical limits of mitochondrial DNA and the risk of contamination. Mitochondrial DNA, inherited only through the maternal line, can persist in old samples and is often used when nuclear DNA has decayed. But it comes with a catch. It is not unique. Thousands of people in Victorian London would have shared the same maternal haplotype. This means a match can only include or exclude broad groups and cannot single out an individual. The process used, polymerase chain reaction, spelled PCR, amplifies whatever DNA is present. That includes not just ancient material, but any modern trace introduced by handlers, auctioneers, or laboratory staff. Without strict negative controls, there is no way to know if the DNA came from the original crime scene or from someone who touched the shawl years later. The 2014 team did not report running extraction blanks or negative controls alongside their samples. That step is now seen as basic forensic practice. Dr. Hansi Weissensteiner, a leading mitochondrial DNA expert, publicly questioned the findings, noting that the lack of controls and incomplete data transparency made the results impossible to verify. Forensic standards demand that any claim be open to independent replication, with raw data and protocols available for scrutiny. By these modern benchmarks, the 2014 study conclusions remain disputed, serving less as a final answer and more as a cautionary tale about the risks of overinterpreting ambiguous genetic evidence. Inside the 2025 Clean Laboratory, every step was designed to keep modern DNA out. Technicians worked in full-body suits, moving between airlocks into a positive pressure clean room. Each instrument, from pipette to sequencer, was dedicated solely to ancient DNA, never used for anything else. Surfaces glowed under UV lamps, and every reagent was tested for contamination before a single fiber of the shawl was touched. Extraction blanks and negative controls ran alongside the real samples. None showed a trace of human DNA. This time, even the air was monitored. The team used next-generation sequencing, targeting fragments of nuclear DNA, short tandem repeats, called STRRS, the gold standard for individual identification. Out of 15 targeted loci, only 8 to 10 yielded usable data per sample, each profile incomplete and interrupted by gaps. The fragments were short, often less than 120 base pairs, with chemical damage typical of DNA over a century old. Where the 2014 study had relied on short stretches of mitochondrial DNA, the new approach produced near-complete mitogenomes, reducing ambiguity but never eliminating it. Even with advanced capture techniques and cleanroom discipline, the nuclear data fell short, partial, degraded, and impossible to match uniquely to any one person. This is the 2025 team's claim. It is not independently replicated and remains speculative until published and reproduced. Expert reviewers cautioned that even with rigorous controls, partial STRS cannot close the case. Mitochondrial genomes, no matter how complete, remain shared across populations. Independent labs would need to recover the same results, with every step documented and open to scrutiny. Until then, the most advanced forensic methods offer only a sharper, but still blurry, view of the past. The story of the shawl's journey is riddled with silence and uncertainty. After its supposed discovery in 1888, the artifact vanishes from any official record. For nearly 50 years, from 1892 until 1941, there is no documentation, no police log, no museum inventory, and no private correspondence that can confirm where the shawl was kept or who handled it. This undocumented span, flagged by forensic auditors and historians alike, stands as a warning. In those decades, the risk of contamination or even substitution rises with every move, every unrecorded handoff. Modern forensic standards depend on an unbroken chain of custody. Here, that chain is not just broken, it is missing for half a century. the ethical stakes are just as fraught. The DNA profiles used to claim a link to Aaron Kosminski's family were drawn from living descendants, many of whom never gave explicit consent for their genetic material to be used in public or commercial investigations. Some have spoken out about the stigma and distress these headlines bring, their family name forever tied to an accusation they cannot disprove. Others, like the descendants of Catherine Eddowes, have pushed for renewed legal recognition, hoping new science might bring long-awaited justice. Yet the lack of transparency and formal consent leaves their privacy and rights in a precarious place, especially under laws like the UK Human Tissue Act and GDPR, which demand clear safeguards for genetic data. With the provenance gap wide open and descendant consent unresolved, every new forensic claim carries a disputed label. The artifact's origins remain clouded, and the people most affected by its story are left without clear recourse. At this point, the search for answers is tangled in missing history and ethical uncertainty, leaving the case suspended at its most uneasy point. Science can illuminate the shadows, but even cutting-edge DNA analysis cannot rewrite flawed records or restore lost evidence. As forensic technology races ahead, the real challenge remains: separating myth from truth in the court of public memory. Some mysteries persist, not for lack of tools, but for want of certainty.